Good evening and welcome to this Cabinet meeting of Oxford City Council on Wednesday, 13th of November from the Long Room at Oxford Town Hall. And apologies for being slightly late. We'll start with the usual apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Hollingsworth and also from Councillor Linda Smith, who is running slightly late. I'm not aware of any other apologies. Well, he's not here. Did Nigel send his apologies? Nigel Chapman. Maybe he has sent his apologies, in which, well, I think it's certainly possible he's been unwell. So I think we'll record his apologies, Nigel Chapman. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay. We have not got any addresses and questions by members of the public. No council addresses on any item for decision on the Cabinet agenda. No council addresses on neighbourhood issues, and no items raised by Cabinet members. So that takes us on to the scrutiny reports. And Catherine, Councillor Miles, you're here to talk to us about those. So over to you, Catherine.
Great, thank you, Susan. So I'm referring to two meetings. There was a scrutiny committee on the 4th of November where we considered a number of items, including, among others, the update on the Oxford River Charter and the Council's engagement with Thames Water, and also a leisure update. And there were 6 recommendations presented to Cabinet relating to those. I'll come to them in a moment. The second meeting I'll be referring to is the Housing and Homelessness panel on the 7th of November, where there was one recommendation made. So turning to the first, which was the main scrutiny meeting, on the update on the development of the Oxford River Charter, I'd just like to thank Councillor Railton and also Mish Tullah for attending and discussing on this. We covered a broad range of topics. It went on a bit longer than we had anticipated, I think, that discussion, but it garnered a lot of interest, and there was concerns regarding the responsibilities between different agencies, the councils and other, and the need for clearer boundaries and understanding there. Legislative gaps at a national level regarding water management and environmental protection, which then has an implication at a local level, and the impact of deregulation on water companies as well. We looked at this topic of domestic misconnections as an area that falls under the responsibility of the council. And then there were issues raised around stormwater runoff and river pollution. Cross-cutting all of these topics was this concern around the need for meaningful engagement with stakeholders between Thames Water, local MPs and members, councillors, to represent residents' interests and ensure that residents' concerns were effectively addressed. So there were 3 recommendations that came from this first item, and you've, I think, seen them in your pack, but just to say, the first was that we welcome the previous meeting that has happened between members and Thames Water, but there was a feeling that it was time for another one to be held. And so it was requested that a structured meeting is requested with them to put forward current concerns around water issues in the city. The second was sort of building on this broader agenda of water management and securing the water in the city for the future, and the need for a multi-stakeholder dialogue to talk about shared actions going forward that could contribute to the content of Oxford City River Action Plan, which was agreed at the motion in July that we would at some point create. And then for that, the idea is that the office has put forward a suggestion around what that convening could look like in due course. And then there was a third recommendation around greater understanding of what is the council's responsibilities to managing domestic or enforcing domestic misconnections, which is where the water pipes are incorrectly fitted within a house, and then contributing to sewage basically being put in from domestic sources into our water sources. So if you've got any questions on any of those recommendations, happy to answer them, but thank you on that point.
Catherine, I think it would probably be helpful if at this point I ask Anna, Councillor Railton, to respond, or to put on the record her response, as you've kind of like gone into a lot of detail on your recommendations. I should also say for the record that Councillor Chapman has joined us, so he's definitely not giving his apologies. So thank you. So Anna.
Thank you very much, Chair. So yes, it was a helpful discussion. I think everybody got quite a lot out of. I think the main thrust was very much that we are desperately trying to sort out the sewage capacity thing first before, like literally we try and sort things out downstream. So hopefully the sort of in part recommendation for the second one is acceptable. Yeah, and then with respect to the misconnections thing, I think there was a sort of a bit of yeah, we didn't know in the meeting, but it just turns out that this is yeah, this comes under building control, and we now understand. Yes, I think there's basically, yes, we have since clarified what our responsibilities there are. So I think the sort of no recommendation there, I think, is probably also acceptable because we've clarified what it actually is, if that's okay.
Thanks, Anna. Catherine, back to you.
Yeah.
With the rest.
You. Yeah, sure. And I think on the second recommendation, what I think would be helpful just to clarify that you know there is this openness to have that meeting and convene that stakeholder consultation, but just a later point of time. So turning on then to the leisure update, and on that, I'd really like to thank Councillor Makongay, Hagen Lewisman, and James Bourne and Nigel Kennedy for attending on that. And just to say that the committee asked various questions around keeping track of how the new contract is progressing and receiving reassurance of the improvements by the new leisure supplier of its performance compared to the previous. And also to explore this topic of accountability for facility conditions and whether actions are being taken to address some of the inherited issues from the previous supplier. So I think we got a lot of reassurances and scrutiny. We're happy, but we did put forward some action items as recommendations. One was around the state of the Barton facilities. A second was around ventilation and retrofitting of changing rooms, because that seems to be a specific issue. And then I think something that garnered some enthusiasm was to use the Lido that you know is a great asset in the city, to see whether that can be available year round, given that have been some investments made to ensure that the water is sustainably heated for the is this energy source. So those were the areas of recommendation, and I'll pause there.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Joey, Councillor Makongay.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was a helpful discussion, and we do actually like it because when you are doing contract management of this size, we need to be scrutinized. The first recommendation of using the Lido oil around, yes, we did accept that recommendation, and basically we have raised it before, and we are effectively talking with our new leisure provider to see if there is a viable business case for it. On the second recommendation, we didn't accept that because that's already taken into account as part of the dilapidation work that we're undertaking. If you remember, we just, the council approved about 3.2 million to update our leisure centers. So that's part of the program as well. The third recommendation of accessing the finances of our new leisure provider, we accepted that, but partial acceptance, because at this moment we believe they are financial sound, their accounts are valuable, you know, on the company's website, company's house. So we feel that, you know, a year's review will be appropriate in this circumstance. Then we'll be able to provide the information needed to the finance panel. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joey. And Catherine, back to you on the final one.
Yes, that's right. And so on the 10th of September, the Housing and Homelessness panel met, and I'd like to thank Councillor Smith, Kieran Edmonds, Caroline Devaney and Richard Wood for attending on this item. The panel discussed a number of items, including the scheme's uptake in Oxford compared to national averages and its flexibility to meet rising demand, and that's of the furnished tenancy scheme, and also how the scheme provides financial relief to tenants, particularly during the context of rising living costs, and also trying to maintain this cost neutral status for the council. There were also questions around policies for tenancy transfer to other properties and opportunities to reduce furniture waste through partnerships with local charities for recycling and repurposing. And it was that last item that there was a recommendation to create these more formalised relationships with local charities to enhance this reuse and recycling. Yeah, I hope that you're satisfied with those recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. I'll respond on behalf of Councillor Smith because unfortunately she's been delayed in getting to the meeting. So, but as you mentioned, the only formal recommendation was around the recycling of furniture and improving our processes around that. That recommendation has been accepted. So there will be work done prior to the contract being put into place to try and make sure that we are able to recycle as much as possible. Thank you for that recommendation.
That's great, thank you.
And thank you very much. Obviously, you're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish, or not, as you wish. So I think bearing in mind that Councillor Smith has got the next 2 items but isn't here, apologies everybody, but I am going to vary the order of the agenda and we will go therefore next to the corporate debt policy. And so over to you, Ed, I'm assuming, is it? So, oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
It's a bit of a double act, I suspect. I will do the sort of more of the sort of the logistics of it all, the way it's organised, and maybe Ed will talk about the bigger numbers, provision for bad debts and arrears and things of that kind. This is a refresh of our corporate debt management policy. This is a large organisation, and inevitably some of the people we interface with get into debt with us, or they can be businesses or individuals. So we need to have a clear policy about that. My overriding view about this is that actually the team is very careful and very thoughtful about the way they pursue debt. And actually, during my time in this portfolio, the number of people, for instance, who we've evicted from council housing because they couldn't pay their arrears is extremely small. And it's because often they end up in prison for long periods of time, or they just disappear off the face of the earth, frankly. And we therefore need to find new tenants for those houses. But generally speaking, we work very carefully to try and bring into place a debt repayment plan that is suitable for the individual, because you have to distinguish in this whole area between those people who have got into debt and can't pay, and therefore you need to work really closely and thoughtfully with them about how they can pay back over a long period of time sometimes, and those people who can pay and just don't want to. And there you need to be tougher, if they don't really frankly have the same excuses as the others do. And therefore we need to pursue them sometimes through the courts, diligent way, and get everybody to focus hard on why they're in debt to us and what they can do to do something about it. Generally speaking, the way we collect debt is pretty successful. I mean, there are some figures in the paper here about the percentage of debt that we recover on council tax at any one moment, or arrears, particularly in housing, and actually we're ahead of the target in this paper, as you'll see in the data. So I think we do a pretty good job here, and I don't really want to say any more. Really, I'll just commend this policy to the cabinet for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel.
Thanks. Only minimally, I think. I mean, maybe three quick points. But first of all, thanking the officers for their hard work on this. It's my strong impression, actually, not just as a cabinet member, but also as a ward councillor and as a councillor with a strong relationship with an advice centre in the area, that the team working in this whole area incomes work really, really hard to try to assist people, that when they are approached, they have the right balance between, of course, protecting scarce public funds, but also showing empathy with people's circumstances. And I think what's set out in this policy is absolutely put into practice. There aren't huge changes here compared to what's been in place before. I think maybe just 3 quick reflections. beyond what Nigel mentioned. I mean, first of all, through a number of categories of debt, things have dipped somewhat with the cost of living crisis. That's absolutely as you would expect. It's still, given not least given our own straitened financial circumstances, important that we do collect money. I'd ask people particularly to bear in mind that during the COVID period, a number of forms of enforcement, for example, in relation to commercial debts, were put on hold in effect, so we couldn't actually enforce. Clearly, that led to some debts not being collected. That's also led to some longer arrangements. So if people read this carefully, they'll see, for example, that there is outstanding commercial debt. We're expecting a good chunk of that to get paid back, but it does get paid back slowly. That's what's going on there. The same point about a slight dip in collection rates also true with respect to council tax. I mean, the other point which I would make, which is that we as a council are relatively unusual in continuing to fund our network of advice centres who do excellent work supporting people in difficulty. And I'm glad to see that referrals for advice are very much part of this policy, and I think that's really valuable. And I also have a good undertaking from Phil and colleagues that when advice centres want dialogue with them, whether that's about individual cases, but also about at a policy level, that's available. So sorry, the thing went off. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ed. Thank you. So yeah, you've stolen Caroline's microphone, which you were appearing as Caroline's.
Which will confuse people.
Oh,
right. Sorry.
Yeah, but Brenda sorted it all out. Right, Nigel and Phil, did you want to add anything?
I'm fine, Chair, actually, but
Phil looks like he's poised to say something, so Phil, over to you.
Just to expand a little bit, people have found this a challenging time. We have some statutory obligations on how we recover debt from our citizens. In addition to that, we support that with a series of text messaging. And before our action gets to a level of seriousness, so for example, around court action, members of my team will ring those people and contact them and offer them payment arrangements. Because what we understand is that once people start to incur fees and costs, it makes it far more difficult for them to pay the bill. So we have a structure really that gives people every opportunity to come and talk to us before matters become more serious. We're also aware within the incomes team and the housing team of the effect on families if we have to evict people and then they have to look to be rehoused. So we're very careful around that front, and we take extra care to ensure that people have every opportunity to make an arrangement with us. And we try to install a ethic really of repayment. So we're quite prepared to take longer arrangements so that we can establish a true payment pattern with people and establish with our customers the kind of rapport where they can ring and they trust us and they feel comfortable to pick up the phone and speak to my operatives. That's all I'd like to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil. And Nigel?
No, I'm fine, thanks. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. Other Nigel, hello.
Nigel, we'd just like to say thank you to officers for their support in redrafting and reformulating this policy. I mean, it's a well put together document, and it's well put together, but both in practice and in reality. And you heard from Phil there, and I work with Phil and the team a lot, that basically I have done for many years now, and I do know they are extremely conscientious about this area and extremely careful about not putting people in impossible positions, because it doesn't help them, it doesn't help us. So they get the balance pretty well right, and I just want to commend them for that. Yeah, thank you very much, Nigel. I mean, I would agree. I think that this is clearly an incredibly important piece of work. We have a duty to the taxpayer and indeed to other tenants to make sure that we collect monies that are owed to the council
But we must do it in a way which absolutely recognises people's individual circumstances and doesn't put them in a more difficult position than they are already in. I think this policy is gets that balance right, and therefore I suspect we're all going to be very happy to support it. Has anyone got any other questions or comments that they wish to make? Joey.
Thank you very much, Susan. Just to add, I've seen something good in the report, just directing people about breathing space, where they can ask for temporary protection from critters. I think that's a good thing to be in the report. Also I haven't seen it, but to just emphasize and point out that the debt relief order now is free, so people can explore that, those who are finding themselves in financial difficulty. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you very much. Okay. Unless anyone else has got any other questions or comments, then can we move to the recommendation, which is to approve the debt management policy as set out in the report? Thank you very much. That is unanimous. So Linda, we varied the order of the agenda, so you haven't missed your opportunities, I'm glad to say. So welcome, and we will now go over to you on the furnished tenancy scheme.
Yeah, sorry I was late, Chair. Presume you've done the comments from scrutiny as well.
We did do the comments from scrutiny, and I just made it clear that you had accepted the recommendation.
Yeah, as recommendations, I think they were very helpful. It was a very helpful recommendation that I was pleased to accept. No doubt you heard from officers that the scheme already goes to great lengths to reuse items wherever possible in various different ways. But the renewal of the contract is a good point to look to see how much more we can do together with our contractor to both reuse and recycle goods. So I welcome that recommendation, which was accepted. I'm pleased to introduce this report. This is not all councils, not all housing associations offer these furnished tenancy schemes, so it's something that I'm very pleased that this council is able to do. As you'll see from the report, over a quarter of our tenancies actually involve the furnished tenancy scheme, so it's an important area of work and really critical for many of our tenants in terms of making the property that they're allocated into a home that they feel is theirs. So yeah, I'd like to also take the opportunity to thank Carolyn and Kieran for all their work on this report. I know Carolyn in particular has worked in this area for many years, and yeah, so I'd just like to thank you for all the work that's gone into this and for the effective running of the scheme since we implemented it.
Fantastic. And we've got Kieran and Richard in the room and Carolyn online. So would any of you like to add anything? No? Okay. Right. Has anyone got any questions or comments on this report? It's not looking like anyone has. I mean, I think I would just say I actually remember when this scheme was first set up, and which was a very long time ago, and I do think it is a really important scheme for us, and it was set up because people were having such trouble coming into a new tenancy with literally nothing. And not being able to afford it. I think it's a really good scheme, and I'm really, really pleased that we're still able to keep it going, and that actually it's going from strength to strength. So I would also like to thank all of you who are involved in making it work for people. Lubna.
Thank you very much, and I agree with those comments. Thank you very much for everyone's hard work. I wanted to ask you about the question that if the furniture is broken, then do you replace it, or is there an opportunity to do so?
Richard, you look like you were poised to answer. Sorry, Richard, you look like you were poised to answer that one.
That's just Carolyn. Do you want to answer that one, or do you want?
Yeah. So if our clients anything breaks down within their 5 years, then at no cost to them it would get replaced, or we would try and repair it, and that would be through utilising already recycled stock within our compound. I've forgotten what you've just asked me. Can you just?
That's right. Yeah. So if say something gets broken, like you've listed here, and under say the bed or the bedding or other items that are needed to set up the home, if they have a problem as such, then do you replace it or do you give them the opportunity to?
So the majority of the furniture is under some form of warranty. So we would either send it back to the contractor if it's within the manufacturer's warranty, and it would be a straight swap at no cost to the council. And as I said earlier, we also, by recouping already pre-used stock, we try and get that back out to the clients, or we would replace as new within that 5-year period. After that 5 years, some items we wouldn't want to replace, like carpets, because they're purchased with the onset of being able to last for those 5 years. But we take every single case on a case-by-case basis and look at individual circumstances. So more often than not, yes, everything would get replaced.
Thank you, Carolyn. Louise.
Just a quick comment. This thing it's something that's absolutely life-changing for people. It makes a difference between it being just 4 walls and it being a cozy home that you can really enjoy living in. I didn't really even know we did this until this report came to here, so I was just absolutely delighted to read it. And thank you all for doing what you're doing, which, as I say, it must be just life-changing for people who take advantage of this scheme. Thanks.
Thank you, Louise. Right. Well, I think you can see which way this report's going to go. I would certainly hope so anyway. Unless anyone's got any further questions or comments, I think we move to the recommendations, which are to approve the procurement of a contract and delegate the authority to award the contract to the relevant suppliers as set out in the report. Is everyone happy to agree that? Fantastic. Thank you all very much. And thank you very much to officers. So the final report that is on the agenda is the Local Authority Housing Fund, and back over to you again, Linda.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Cabinet will be familiar with the principles of this report because we have benefited from previous rounds of the LAF funding. So like in previous rounds, it involves a government grant to pay for approximately 50% of the cost of properties which we'll be purchasing. In this particular round, we've been allocated funding which should cover the cost of 5 properties together with our match funding. 3 of those in the first instance will be allocated to Afghan families who are part of the UK government resettlement scheme, and another 2 properties will be free to us to use as temporary accommodation, which is obviously a really acute need that we have at the moment. The properties will be, even though they are attracting 50% funding from government, the properties will belong to the council. There'll be regular council homes. We will be keeping all of the rental income from those properties. And once those 3 initial Afghan families, when their tenancy ends, whenever that may be, we will have full allocation rights as usual to those properties. So I think this is a good deal for the HRA and a really important part of our commitment to being a city of sanctuary and being taking full responsibility in terms of welcoming people in need of a safe place to stay from around the world. Hand over to officers for any further explanation or to answer questions.
Stephen, Richard, anything? No? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Again, open to questions or comments from the rest of Cabinet. I mean, I would just agree with Linda, really, that I think it's been a very good scheme for us. It's important work that we do, making sure that we are providing sanctuary for people who need it, but actually it also helps us in the long run to add additional properties to our HRA. So I think it's really a win for other residents of the city as well. So I think that's an important point to make. Anyone? No? Okay, well, in which case we are getting through the agenda very fast today. That's good. So the recommendations in the report are to approve the council becoming part of the Local Authority Housing Fund round 3 in order to get those 5 new affordable homes, approving the allocation of budget, and delegating authority to enter into the relevant agreements and contracts. All of those issues obviously being set out in full in the report. Everyone happy to agree those recommendations? Fantastic. Thank you very much. That is unanimous. So we then move on to the next item on the agenda, and I've now lost the front page of my agenda. There we go, which is the minutes. So has anyone got anything they want to raise on the minutes? Yes, Louise. Exciting.
I know,
This
massively
never
important.
happens. Okay, carry on.
But I think they all, and certainly this one does say that the membership of cabinet is 10, but the membership of cabinet is only 9 now.
She's been
you
reading
see
the minutes. This is very good. Okay, no, you're quite right, and that should actually be corrected. Where does it actually say that? I missed that.
It might have been, it's on these new ones. It's on today's agenda actually, rather than perhaps.
Oh, is
it's
it
not
on the agenda? It's on the.
It's on
the
today's agenda. It might not
Yeah.
actually be on the draft. Sorry. Just noticed it today. It may not say it on the actual.
It does, you're right. It says it, so it's not actually on the minutes, but it's something that we do need to change because it says it on the front of the agenda. So, yeah, you're quite right. However, the minutes are perfect, so
Minutes are perfect.
nobody's found anything actually on the minutes. So yes, I'm assuming that nobody's got any matters arising. We can agree them as an accurate record. Great, okay, in which case it only falls for me to say that the dates of future meetings are the 11th of December, 22nd of January and 5th of February. And thank you very much, everybody. I declare the meeting closed.
Well done.
Just because I was quick last time, you don't have to like try and show me up.